What do you do when the business you built from nothing doesn't feel like yours anymore? That question had been haunting Miles Fletcher for weeks. 16 hotels across 4 states. Over 1,500 employees. Bookings were steady, revenue was up, but something felt off. He'd been getting vague reports: low staff morale, poor room upkeep, slow service. Nothing specific, just off. And that was the problem. The more layers of management between him and the front lines, the less he knew. He didn't want to be the kind of CEO who only saw polished presentations and cherry-picked data. That wasn't how he started. 10 years ago, Miles had cleaned rooms himself. He'd checked in guests. He'd folded towels in the back room and plunged toilets when no one else would. He knew what good service looked like because he'd done it. But now he couldn't even remember the name of the manager running the Birmingham location. That's where he was headed tonight. The Birmingham Hotel was one of the newer ones, opened just under a year ago. It looked flawless on paper: high occupancy, minimal complaints, stable staff. But Miles didn't trust paper anymore. So he booked a room under the name Michael Foster, a name no one in the company would recognize. He wore tinted glasses, grew out some facial hair, and dyed his salt and pepper hair a flat brown. To everyone else, he was just another tired businessman checking in for the night. He rolled a plain black suitcase across the polished tile floor of the lobby. The front desk clerk, a young woman with a stiff smile, barely looked up. "Welcome to Birmingham Lakeside." "Name?" "Michael Foster," he said, handing over his ID. It was a fake, but a good one. His assistant had made sure of it. She typed without a word for a few seconds, then handed him a keycard. "You're in room 315. Elevators to the right. No eye contact. No warmth." Miles gave her a nod and headed toward the elevator. The hotel looked clean, but there was something sterile about it. No artwork. No music. Just silence and beige walls. It didn't feel like the place he dreamed of building. When he reached his floor, he heard a soft voice from down the hall. "No, baby, mommy's okay. I promise." Miles paused. It wasn't loud, just enough to catch his ear. The voice came from a cracked open housekeeping closet. He moved closer quietly. Inside, a woman in a faded uniform, maybe in her early 30s, sat on a flipped-over bucket, her phone pressed to her ear. Her back was to him, but her tone was gentle and full of warmth. "I'll be home in a few hours. Okay? You eat the soup Grandma made, and then brush your teeth. Just like we practiced." There was a pause. "Tell Ollie I miss him too. I'll bring him those dinosaur stickers tomorrow." Miles didn't move. "I know, but we have a roof, right? And food. We're gonna be okay, baby. I'm working hard for you. You just keep being brave." A soft laugh. Then silence. She ended the call, wiped her eyes quickly with the sleeve of her uniform, and stood up. Her name tag read Eliza. She grabbed a cart of clean towels and pushed it into the hallway, not noticing Miles duck into his room just before she turned the corner. He stood on the other side of the door, not moving. That call, it hit him harder than he expected. He didn't know her, had never met her. But in that moment, Eliza represented exactly the kind of person he built this company for: hardworking, proud, doing what it took to take care of her family. He sat on the edge of the bed. His plan was to quietly observe, maybe talk to some staff, get a feel for things. But now he wanted to know more. Who was running this place? Were they treating people like Eliza right? The next morning, he went down to the small breakfast area. The coffee was cold. The eggs were rubbery. The one staff member there, a young man named Tyler, looked exhausted and barely spoke above a mumble when guests asked for anything. "Hey," Miles said, stepping aside with him. "Busy morning?" Tyler looked at him, eyes tired. "Always. We're down 2 people. Manager says we can't afford to replace them yet." Miles frowned. How long's it been like that? A month. Maybe more. How many people working right now? Just me and housekeeping. What about the manager? Tyler snorted under his breath. "Hiding in the office, like usual." Miles's gut tightened. This wasn't just about low morale. This was a red flag. He spent most of the day quietly observing. The front desk girl from the night before Jessica was short with guests, didn't smile, and rolled her eyes when one elderly couple asked for help with directions. Housekeeping worked non-stop. Eliza was there again, moving quickly, checking rooms, helping a newer girl who clearly didn't know the layout yet. Miles caught a quick moment with her near the vending machines. "Rough day?" he asked casually. Eliza smiled, tired but warm. "They all are. But it's honest work." "You like working here?" She hesitated. "It's okay. It was better when Miss Clara ran it. She left 2 months ago." "Why?" "Don't know. Just didn't show up one day. Now we got Mr. Dean." "Dean?" "The manager. Stays in the office mostly. Doesn't really talk to us unless something's wrong." Miles nodded, heart sinking. Back in his room, he pulled up the company files. Dean Thomas. Hired from outside the company. No hotel background, came from retail. Miles remembered now. It was a rushed hire. They'd needed someone fast. He hadn't met him face to face. That would change. That night, Miles stayed late in the common area watching Dean stroll past the front desk like he owned the place. He didn't greet the night staff. Didn't check the lobby. Just disappeared into the office. Miles followed, slipping around the corner and stopping just outside the office door. He waited, then knocked. "Yeah?" came a voice. Miles cracked the door open. "Hey, I'm Michael. Just a guest." Had a quick question. Dean didn't look up from his screen. "Leave it with the front desk." "I did." "They said to check with you." Dean sighed loudly and finally glanced over. "Fine. What is it?" Miles stepped inside, eyes scanning the cluttered office. Fast food wrappers, a half-finished soda, and a screen playing a basketball game. "I was wondering why your staff seems so overworked," he said calmly. Dean narrowed his eyes. "What?" "I mean, breakfast guy said you're short-staffed. I saw your front desk ignore guests. And housekeeping's doing double time." Dean shrugged. "It's a tight budget. We manage." "You call this managing?" Dean stood up slowly. "Look, guest or not, you don't get to walk in here, and I'm not just a guest." Miles pulled off his glasses. Dean froze. "I'm Miles Fletcher. I own this place. And we need to talk." Dean's expression shifted, but not to embarrassment or guilt. He looked wary, calculating. Miles watched his eyes flick to the office door, then back. "Didn't expect you here," Dean said finally. "I figured," Miles replied. "That's why I came." Dean folded his arms, leaning his weight against the desk. "Look, if there's a problem, I wish you'd come to me directly. We're doing the best we can with what we've got." "You don't know what the problem is yet," Miles said. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here to see on my own how this place runs. And what I've seen so far. It's not good." Dean didn't respond, but his jaw set tight. Miles glanced around the office again. The desk was cluttered with unopened mail, a half-filled HR binder buried under food wrappers, and a dusty training manual wedged behind a printer. The TV behind Dean played quietly with the volume off. Basketball highlights looped across the screen. "Tell me something," Miles said, keeping his voice even. "What's your average staff turnover in the last 60 days? Dean hesitated. "Couple people left. That's normal in hospitality." "How many housekeepers do you have scheduled tomorrow?" 5. Miles raised an eyebrow. "I counted 3 today. 2 called out this morning," Dean said quickly. "Not my fault they didn't show. And you didn't fill in, didn't call anyone else in, didn't offer help." Dean gave a short laugh. "You want me folding towels? I want you managing." Dean's lips parted like he wanted to fire back. But then he stopped himself. "All right, look, I've had to make hard choices. This place doesn't run on wishful thinking. We're under budget pressure. Corporate's always asking for more with less. I didn't ask you to cut corners," Miles said. "I asked you to lead. And right now, I don't see leadership." A silence settled between them. Dean shifted again, but he didn't apologize. Instead, he turned toward his monitor and clicked off the TV. "I get that you're upset," he said. "But if you want this place to keep turning a profit, we need to be realistic. Can't have people sitting around on payroll if the numbers don't justify it. You're justifying neglect, Miles said. And you're calling it efficiency. Dean's eyes narrowed. With all due respect, you're making judgments off one day. Miles stepped forward. And you've had 60. He didn't wait for a response. He left the office, walked back through the hallway, and took the stairs down instead of the elevator. His mind was already racing ahead. Dean wasn't the kind of manager who failed because he didn't know better. He failed because he didn't care enough to do better. The next morning, Miles didn't announce anything. He went to the laundry room instead. The door was propped open with a bent chair, and the scent of bleach hung thick in the air. Inside, a young woman with headphones on was loading towels into a massive industrial dryer. She danced slightly to the beat, unaware of him at first. "Morning," Miles said. She jumped, pulling the headphones down. "Oh, sorry. Thought I was alone." "No worries. I'm just here to help." She looked him over, uncertain. "You're new." "Sort of. Just filling in for a few days." "I'm Lena," she said, brushing her hair back with the back of her wrist. "You want to fold or sort?" "Whatever's most helpful." Lena handed him a stack of towels and showed him the folding table setup. As they worked, she spoke freely. "Honestly, I thought about quitting last week," she said, not looking at him. "But Eliza keeps holding this place together. She trains new people, fixes stuff when it breaks, even brought us lunch last Friday when we couldn't leave the floor." Miles didn't say anything, just listened. "She's been here almost 4 years. Got promoted once, then they took it back during the restructure. No raise? Just told her things changed." Lena shook her head. "Still shows up every day? You've been here long?" "Since last summer. I like the job, but it's not easy when we're short. Last week we had to clean 24 checkouts with 3 people. That's a lot." "Yeah, but no one complains to management anymore. They don't listen." Miles folded another towel and stacked it in silence. After lunch, he moved to the service hallway outside the guest rooms. The light overhead buzzed faintly. He found Eliza again, this time checking her supply cart. Her sleeves were rolled up and a clipboard hung from the side. "Need a hand?" he asked. She turned, surprised. "You again?" "I'm learning the ropes." She gave him a curious look but didn't question it. "All right, grab the vacuum. Room 422 needs a deep clean." They worked side by side for the next half hour. Miles vacuumed while Eliza stripped the bed and scrubbed the bathroom floor. "You're pretty good at this," she said, glancing at his technique. "Had some practice." "Long time ago." Eliza looked over her shoulder. "You don't talk like someone who's new to this." "Maybe I'm not." She smiled faintly, then went quiet. They finished the room in under 20 minutes. "Mind if I ask something?" she said as they stepped into the hallway. "Sure. Why are you really here?" Miles paused at the question. "What makes you ask? You don't act like the others. You're not rushing. You're actually paying attention." He met her eyes. "I wanted to see what really happens here. What people go through. You've been here a while, you've seen the good and bad." Eliza nodded slowly. "I stay because I need to. I don't like how things are, but I've got 2 kids and a schedule that lets me be home by dinner most nights. That's rare. You ever think about leaving?" "Sure. But then who trains the new girl when she's in tears on her second shift? Who holds the elevator when a guest can't figure out their key card?" Miles could hear the edge creeping into her voice, but it wasn't anger. It was disappointment. Acceptance. "You shouldn't have to carry all that," he said. "And yet," she replied, "if I don't, who will?" She moved past him, wheeling the cart toward the next room. That night, Miles sat in the staff break room long after most shifts had ended. The vending machine hummed in the corner. The walls were bare except for a faded flyer about workplace safety. He thought about every person he'd met in the last 2 days. Tyler barely hanging on. Lena dancing through exhaustion. Eliza holding the place together without recognition. He pulled out his phone and opened the internal HR dashboard. He started making notes. Not for retaliation but for restructuring. The front desk needed retraining. The kitchen crew needed immediate staffing help. Housekeeping needed a lead with real authority and a raise. And Dean? He had no future here. Miles leaned back, staring at the ceiling. He hadn't wanted to come face to face with the cost of his distance. But now that he wasn't about to look away. Tomorrow he'd schedule a meeting with the whole staff. Quietly, privately. Everything was going to change, but not with a press release or a memo. It would start with a conversation. One they'd never forget. Miles stood near the service elevator at 6:30 the next morning, wearing the same plain polo and black work pants he'd quietly picked up from the hotel's surplus uniform closet. He didn't tell anyone what he was doing, not even his executive assistant back at headquarters. For now, this was between him and the people who made the hotel run. As the morning shift began trickling in, Miles kept his distance. He watched how the team moved quiet, focused, no wasted steps. The atmosphere was subdued, not tense, just heavy with routine. A rhythm built out of necessity, not trust. By 7, the tiny break room held 6 employees and no conversation. People sat hunched over coffee cups or scrolling silently on their phones. Miles noticed how every glance toward the hallway was cautious, like they were bracing for something to go wrong before the day even started. No sign of Dean. Eliza came in last, tossing her bag under the coat hooks before heading straight for her cart. She carried herself like someone already behind, though the shift had barely begun. Miles approached her as she restocked her cleaning supplies. "You free for 5 minutes before you head up?" he asked. She glanced over, brow furrowed. "I've got 3 rooms to prep before 8. I'll walk with you." They moved down the north wing corridor, her cartwheels squeaking softly on the tile. Eliza moved briskly, her eyes scanning door numbers while Miles kept pace. "What's going on?" she asked, not slowing. "I'm calling a meeting tonight. Just staff. No Dean. I want you there." She frowned. "What kind of meeting?" "The kind where people get to speak without worrying who's going to retaliate." Eliza didn't respond immediately. She reached room 207, keyed in with practiced speed, and pushed the door open. "Why now?" she asked, stepping inside. "Because I've been watching long enough." She began stripping the bed, her movements precise. "People get tired of talking when nothing changes. I'm not asking anyone to talk. I'm asking people to show me what needs fixing." She paused, looking at him fully for the first time that morning. "If you're serious, then don't just listen." "I'm not here to listen. I'm here to act. But I won't do it without understanding the fallout." Eliza nodded once. "Then I'll be there." That evening, after the dinner rush but before the overnight crew arrived, Miles stood in the utility hallway just outside the laundry room. He'd asked Eliza to quietly spread the word. No formal memo, no announcements, just a simple ask. "Come if you've got something to say." By 6:30, the small folding table near the back wall had been cleared. A few battered office chairs were dragged in from storage. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead as nearly a dozen employees filtered in. Some sat, others leaned against the walls. Miles stood at the far end, arms loose at his sides. He didn't want a podium. He didn't want distance. He waited until the room had settled. "I'm not going to pretend this is normal," he said. "You didn't ask for this. But I'm asking for honesty tonight. Nothing leaves this room unless you want it to." No one moved right away. Then Tyler, the morning kitchen assistant, shifted forward in his chair. "I've been covering double stations for 3 weeks, he said. "We're supposed to have a second prep, but no one's filled the spot since Jason left." "Did you ask for help?" Miles asked. 3 times. "Dean told me to figure it out. Said the budget wouldn't allow another hire until next quarter." "Anyone else told that?" Miles looked around. A woman near the wall raised her hand slightly. "Front desk," she said. "I've been solo on night shift for 5 weekends in a row. When I asked for backup, I was told to lock the lobby doors if it got too busy." Someone snorted under their breath. A few others shook their heads. Eliza's voice cut through next. "We've had to train new hires without any orientation. I made my own checklist just so they wouldn't get overwhelmed. But they still quit within days." Miles nodded. "Has anyone seen a training manual?" or been offered paid onboarding time. A few shook their heads. One person laughed bitterly. What about safety protocols? He asked. Evacuation plans? Incident reporting? A housekeeper named Rena spoke up, her voice hesitant. A guest slipped near the pool last month. We didn't have the right form. Dean told me not to log it until we knew if they were going to sue. Miles's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice even. Did anyone follow up with the guest? Rena shook her head. Not that I know of. A silence fell over the room. It wasn't awkward, it was thick with realization. People were looking around now, seeing each other's exhaustion mirrored back. I'm not going to ask you to fix this, Miles said. That's not your job. But I want to be clear about something. You've been carrying this place on your backs. And I let it get this far because I stopped looking close enough. He paused, letting that land. But that ends now. Dean's being put on administrative leave, effective immediately. Corporate HR is sending a transition team tomorrow. We'll do a full review of staffing levels, payroll logs, and compliance reports. A few people exchanged glances. One man crossed his arms, skeptical. You're going to hear a lot of promises in the next few days, Miles said. But here's what I want instead. A list. Every one of you. Give me one thing that would make your job sustainable. Not perfect. Not easy. Just fair. He pulled a small notepad from his pocket and placed it on the table. Write it down. Don't sign your name if you don't want to. I'll read every one and I'll respond to every item publicly by the end of the week. Eliza stepped forward and picked up the pen first. She didn't speak. She just wrote, then passed it to the next person. Miles stepped back and let it happen. By the time the last note was written, Dean had already left the building. Corporate HR had been briefed and a temporary regional supervisor was scheduled to arrive before sunrise. But that wasn't the real shift. The real shift was in how people stood as they left the room, shoulders just a little straighter, steps a little more grounded. Miles waited until the last employee had walked out before picking up the notepad. He read the first few lines in silence. A working ice machine on every floor. More than one uniform per person. A manager who shows up. He closed the pad. It wasn't complicated. It was the bare minimum. And it was going to get done. Miles returned to the Birmingham Lakeside 2 weeks later, this time through the front entrance in a tailored gray blazer and without the disguise. No tinted glasses. No fake name. Just himself. He didn't call ahead. The front desk staff didn't recognize him at first until a woman in her late 50s stepped out from the back office, adjusted her reading glasses, and blinked in surprise. Miles Fletcher, she said cautiously. Ms. Harper, he replied. Still working circles around people, I see. She gave a small nod, then leaned in slightly. You're early. Intentionally. MS. Harper had been temporarily reassigned from a Savannah property to stabilize the Birmingham location. She wasn't flashy, but she knew operations cold and had a reputation for running a tight ship without making anyone feel small. Miles had chosen her personally. I want to see how things are actually going. No prep, no walkthroughs. Just the real deal. She motioned toward the hallway behind the lobby. Then you might want to head upstairs. They're doing room turnarounds now. Eliza's training 2 new hires. Miles's eyebrows lifted. 2. They're part-time, but they're sticking so far. She wrote the new onboarding packet herself. He didn't say anything. Just nodded and headed toward the elevator. On the 3rd floor, he found Eliza kneeling beside a supply cart, tightening a loose wheel with a ratchet driver. A young man and woman stood nearby, watching her with careful attention. Check the door latch every time, even if the room looks vacant, Eliza said. Had a guest walk in on a half-made bed last week because someone forgot. She looked up and caught sight of Miles, then stood slowly. You came back, she said. I said I would. She glanced at the new hires. Guys, keep working on 418. I'll be back in 5. Once they were out of earshot, she leaned against the corridor wall. You didn't announce the changes. Not officially. Just started moving pieces. I didn't want to make promises until I knew we could deliver. They weren't expecting much. I was. She let that sit for a second. The schedule's still tight. We're covering more ground than we should. But it's better. People are staying past their first week. Miles nodded. That's a start. Eliza looked past him, down the hallway where the new hires had gone. They're young. First jobs. They're nervous but trying. They're lucky to have you showing them how it's done. She didn't respond to that, just crossed her arms. I heard Dean filed a complaint. He did, Miles said. He's gone for good. She didn't press. Instead, she stepped away from the wall and picked up a clipboard from the cart. We made a new rotation system. Lena helped. It's not perfect, but it keeps people from getting stuck with the worst rooms every shift. Send it to HQ, Miles said. If it works here, it might work elsewhere. She turned toward the next room, but paused at the door. You're not just fixing this place, are you? No, he said. I'm fixing the structure that allowed this to happen. She gave a single nod, then disappeared into the room. Miles stayed in the corridor a few seconds longer, listening to the muffled sounds of vacuuming and quiet instruction. Downstairs, the breakfast area had been reorganized. The layout was tighter but more efficient. A new warming tray had replaced the old cracked one, and a printed schedule listed prep times and food rotation logs. Tyler stood behind the counter, flipping waffles with a steadier hand than Miles remembered. He glanced up. Didn't think I'd see you again. Miles stepped beside the counter. Figured I owed you a better visit. Tyler poured another batch of batter and wiped down the surface with a clean towel. We've got a second prep now. She's not fast yet, but she shows up. You look more rested. Hard not to when you're not doing two jobs at once. Miles folded his arms. You write one of those notes? Yeah. Which one? Tyler handed off a plate to a guest, then looked back. The one about wanting someone to notice when we're underwater. Miles didn't respond right away. Then he said, I noticed. Took too long, but I noticed. Tyler gave a half nod, then turned back to the waffle iron. Later that morning, Miles sat with Ms. Harper in the now decluttered management office. The TV had been removed. A small corkboard on the far wall held daily shift goals, open requests, and a calendar with color-coded staffing blocks. It wasn't fancy, but it was functional. We're still understaffed, she said, but morale's stable. No call-outs in 5 days. That's the longest streak in weeks. Probably longer. Miles tapped a pen against the desk. You planning on staying? Ms. Harper gave a soft chuckle. Don't flatter me. I'm only here until the end of the quarter. You've got your eyes on someone else for this place. Eliza? She doesn't know it yet. But yes, she's got the instincts. She's got the respect, Ms. Harper said. And that's harder to teach. Miles nodded. What does she need? Time. Authority. And someone who believes she can do it. Done. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Miles stood. I'm heading back to Atlanta, but I'll be back again in 2 weeks. Not as a surprise. Just to listen. MS. Harper didn't look up. You'd better. They're finally starting to believe you mean it. Outside, the day had warmed. The lobby's front windows let in soft sunlight, and for the first time, the space felt less like a waiting room and more like a welcome. Miles paused by the front desk. A new associate, maybe early 20s, was checking in an older couple. She smiled, genuinely offered directions to the elevator, and handed them a small welcome card. He watched without interrupting. As he stepped out onto the sidewalk, he pulled out his phone and opened the internal dashboard. Not the financials, the operations feed. He scrolled past the numbers and tapped into the new pilot program proposal, ground-level audit rotation. He added a line at the top. Every executive team member will work 1 entry-level shift per quarter. No exceptions. Then he hit send. He looked back at the hotel once before walking to his car. It didn't look different from the outside. Same brick, same signage, same small parking lot with the same uneven curb near the entrance. But inside, the foundation was shifting. Not because of policy, because of people. Because of Eliza's quiet strength. Because of Tyler's persistence. Because someone had finally listened. And this time, they weren't going to stop.